Hi Nick, it's great to be with you today and thank you very much for joining me on my Legal Ops interview series. You posted on LinkedIn recently about your early experience selling chocolate on the London Underground and how those experiences still help you today. Could you expand on the value of those early experiences and how you ultimately ended up pursuing a career in the law?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time ago, but I think I can give you a little bit of a flavour about how I kind of ended up in a career in law. And I think, I didn't start off wanting to be a lawyer from when I was at school or even when I was at university. And so I did my first degree in politics and economics in Newcastle. And to be honest, I never really had much idea really what I wanted to do after that, much to the annoyance of my parents. My brother and sister were the absolute opposites and knew exactly what I wanted to do when they were like 12 years old, so I was the black sheep of the family. And so I kind of left uni not really knowing what I wanted to do, but I kind of wanted to come to London. Here we are today. Very grey today, it wasn't so grey then. And I just got a job working in the Cadbury graduate scheme and ended up my first kind of role was selling chocolate on the underground. And things kind of went from there, and then I did 2.5 years maybe with Cadbury, and then at one point I just thought, I wanted to go and do something, get some more qualifications really, and it was a choice between maybe going into teaching or the law, and my mum was a teacher, so I went and worked at her school for a bit, decided I didn't want to do that and I wanted to become a lawyer. So that's kind of sort of how that happened. But I think one of the things on that LinkedIn post was that, 20 odd years, more than that, back in time now, there are still things that I think that happen to me every week where I look back at my time selling chocolate on the underground and some of the skills I learned there, some of the basic kind of commercial attributes, some of the stuff around kind of resilience and just keeping going and not giving up, those things still resonate today. So I think, especially now when I speak to people who are thinking about law, and one of the promising things I think is that the pathways into law are really opening up, and I'm sure we'll talk about legal ops a lot more in the podcast, but that avenue in particular, you don't need to have qualifications anymore, so it's a very, very diverse range. But I think actually to be good at your job, whatever you're doing in law, it's useful to have a really diverse range of experience and interest and background, to be really curious. And I think coming from a slightly non-traditional background into law, that really helps, because you just have that curiosity and you want to ask questions and understand why, rather than kind of be more narrow focused.
What was your experience training as a lawyer and moving from private practice to in-house?
Yeah, I guess so like most in-house lawyers at the moment, nearly all of us started in private practice, which is probably interesting. We might come on to that and the drawbacks of that to some extent. But so I went to Leeds to do my conversion course and my LPC, and then I was fortunate to get a training contract at Eversheds Sutherland now. And I qualified into the litigation team there basically, and I did 2 years post-qualification, so not too long, but I think it was pretty clear to me early on that I wanted to move in-house, so then I moved in-house from there, so that's kind of how that happened. So I got a job at Johnson Matthey, which at the time was FTSE 60, I think it's now FTSE 250, not because I've left. UK headquarters of a global chemicals company, and I just took a role there as a kind of legal advisor. I just saw the role and applied for it, and I got it. So I just wanted to move in-house, and again, I think probably similar to a lot of things that have happened in my career, there's not so much planning, it's more just look for opportunities and then try and do the best that you can in those roles and trust that other opportunities will develop from that.
Could you talk about your journey into legal operations at Dyson and your top tips for the community?
Yeah, so I mean, my first role in legal ops was at Dyson. I think it was about 3 years ago that the chief legal officer at Dyson approached me, and I'd been doing a kind of compliance role at Dyson, and said, would I be interested in trying to kind of deploy sort of legal operations methodology to transform a legal team at Dyson. And I'll be quite honest with you, Jamie, I didn't know what he was talking about, but what I normally do is say yes to people, then go figure out what I'm supposed to do after that. So it just sounded like an incredible opportunity because, at Dyson, great company. We had large legal team, large external budget, large in-house team. So it just felt like a really significant opportunity to try and do something. And once I then started to look into what legal operations was, it felt like something that was pretty exciting. And, I think it's proved out that it was exciting, so it was good. So I think the first thing, I guess the first piece of advice would be, kind of embrace it and don't wait till you feel like you've got all the answers before you start doing stuff. You'll be able to figure out as you go along. But really, it's about wanting to transform the way that we deliver legal services. I mean, it could be in private practice context as well, but just to transform the way that we do things from what is a fairly traditional conservative approach, professional approach, to something that looks very different. And I think it's exciting. So yeah, you just get stuck in.
What were your key observations when you started to review the existing processes and technology being used by the legal team?
Yeah, I mean, to be very candid and blunt, 3 years ago coming into this kind of completely new, one of the things that immediately struck me looking at the kind of existing legal technology that we were using at Dyson at the time was none of it was working. And that was just obvious. Like, none of it was working. It wasn't delivering the efficiencies that it was supposed to be delivering. The lawyers hated using it. The business didn't understand it. So it was just, none of it was working. And that was across various things like matter management, NDA stuff. Again, we can dig into this, but like one of the main reasons for that, I think, is that largely in the legal tech space, the off-the-shelf products have been developed for a private practice market, which is completely the opposite of what's happening in-house. So the products themselves just weren't fit for purpose. But I recognised that none of it was working. That's easy to observe. Then you try and figure out, well, why isn't it working? And that was the first thing. It was really designed for private practice stuff. But the second reason was that it just had been very badly implemented. So sometimes there was nothing wrong with the actual technology, it just hasn't been implemented very well. But then to try and dig into that a bit more is to try and understand, well, why has that happened? And I think quite quickly it became evident to me that one of the key reasons was because if you're in an in-house legal team, however much lawyers like to think they're important, you are not very important, because the business you're working for, in this case at Dyson, was there to design incredible household appliances with great engineering and then sell them to people that and make lots of money. Or you might be working for a company now like Therme Group, where we're trying to build out a global network of wellbeing resorts. But whatever you're doing, it isn't there to generate legal work. So you're not a priority, and one way that manifests itself is you're not going to get the level of technology and IT support that other parts of the business will. The analogy I often use, which I've probably heard me say lots of times, it's boring, is at Dyson, if I wanted to implement a legal matter management system and I needed some IT support, but then next to me in the kind of IT steerco is the commercial director who says, well, if we do this work on our website, we're going to generate £100 million more revenue. Well, it's pretty obvious where that support's going to go. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying one of the problems with the technology was, if you're going to introduce something which requires even a relatively small amount of technology change through your IT pipeline, that's going to be difficult and you're not going to get the support you need. And even if you get it implemented, you're not going to get the support you need to keep it updated and maintained and optimized and stuff. And that's what was actually happening. And I think the more work I do in the legal space and with the community and stuff, the more that I see this repeated over and over again. People buy the technology, maybe it works to begin with, but then it stops working and they can't figure it out within their own in-house environment. So all of that pointed me towards thinking, okay, what we've got to try and do is get the biggest technology bang for the smallest amount of intervention buck. So how can we do something that requires the least amount of support from our IT team, from our technology teams, in this case in Dyson, that will deliver the most amount of change and benefit for the legal teams and our customers.
How did you align your legal ops strategy with the wider IT team? And were there any key benefits to this approach, such as speed to delivery or license cost savings?
Well, the magic thing at the time at Dyson was that there were people within the, and again, this is I think this is quite an interesting point. I think it is. Lawyers have a lot of ego, so we think we're much more important than we actually are. The reality at Dyson was the IT team was much bigger and more important than the legal team. Okay, so then it's about trying to kind of subordinate and reduce your ego and recognize that actually, if you can fit in with other people, that's going to make your life a lot easier and you can accomplish a lot more. And one of the things that we realized really quickly was within that kind of fairly large IT team, there was a small team that was dedicated to rolling out and optimizing the use of Office 365 technology because they'd invested, the IT team had invested in Office 365 technology and it wasn't being utilized in the business. So they had maybe a team of 10 people whose only job it was to go around different parts of the enterprise and go, could you use it better? Could you use it better? So it was like, once we realized that, it's like, well, this is pushing an open door, because if we're just going to go to them and say, we need to do this functionality, and they would help us from the solution, then of course they own the solution, which motivates them to help to implement it. So, I mean, that was a kind of neat moment. But I think the other points you make are valid too, which is even if it hadn't been for that, you've got an obvious cost benefit because you've already got the technology and the licenses, you're already paying for it. So it's about just using that to the best, optimizing the use of that. So yeah, that exists too. But in that scenario, they actually had a team within the IT environment function that was pushing the use of that technology. So they wanted to help.
And how did you use Microsoft to streamline matter intake, capture better management information, and deliver an improved legal service to your internal clients?
Yeah, I mean, this is not revolutionary, but whether you call it a portal or a front door, whatever, but all that you're trying to do is to capture as much of that demand as you can through a single entry point. For us, that we called it legal service portal, and it was just effectively using Office 365. It was like a digital door to access legal support. And then we built a lot of kind of customer journeys where you go down and all that stuff. But I think that's the first point, because if you can't find a way to capture that demand, you're a bit lost to begin with, because you'll never be able to get the data you want. You won't be able to start to implement the solutions you want. So that's the first point. And I think one of the things that we found working with you guys at the site was, and actually challenging ourselves, was at Dyson, it was quite useful. So we looked at the experience that we would deliver, the user experience we would deliver as a business to our customers. So if you wanted to buy a Dyson machine online, what would you expect to see when you enter into a digital marketplace? And it makes it very easy to make selections, and there are some basic design ground rules, like you can't have more than, I can't remember, 6 choices on a page, and it should never take more than 4 clicks to get to the end point. And I think that was really good discipline, because when we first got the lawyers to start doing it, you had these mega complex pages, like 30 different choices. It would take 10 clicks to get to something that wasn't even an answer in the end anyway. And actually creating that discipline really forced creativity. Because when you say to someone, well, you can only have 6 choices on a page and you can only have 4 clicks to an endpoint. So now you could go to the legal teams and say, so every service you deliver, we have to fit it within this model. And to explain to them why that was, by saying, well, if you go and buy something on Apple or on Dyson or whatever, that's what you'd expect. So why should we do it differently? That was really helpful, and that's what we started to build out, and we were using Office 365 to do that.
And Nick, what's your strategy now at Therme Group, and how can smaller legal teams start delivering value today through legal ops and technology?
Yeah, it's very different. It's a different role and a very different company, in a very different stage of its life cycle. So Therme Group is about developing a global network of wellbeing resorts, and we are a relatively small company in comparison to Dyson at the moment, but with lots of ambition and a rapid scale up. So part of this is to try and take some of the learnings that I've had from Dyson, and obviously now kind of from the wider legal ops community, and think about how we establish the process and technology to enable that scale up to happen. So I guess, bluntly, rather than having to fix the problems once you get to scale, is to try and solve those problems now so they don't happen in the first place. I mean, recognizing also that everything goes wrong all the time, so that's fine too. But so I think, again, in a way, the answers are quite similar, which is you don't have vast amounts of cash for investing in technology anyway, and if you did, it wouldn't be invested in legal tech probably in an in-house environment because the business has demands elsewhere. You also need to try and create something quite simple. Therme Group's an interesting company because we've got significant presence in Romania and in Germany, and then lots of different stuff all around the world. But from a legal point of view, Germany and Romania aren't necessarily the easiest jurisdictions to digitize legal services. In fact, they're probably some of the hardest, and people don't. It's hard to convince people to do that because they're in a different type of legal environment. So yeah, it's just been trying to, again, find those simple solutions using the technology that we already have access to in Microsoft, and again, beginning to build out a portal that people can access services through. And I think crucially is just trying to show people that it works rather than tell them, and then gradually they start to use it. We use Ironclad as well, so for contract management, but having that mindset where things will break and then we just fix them and make them better, rather than have this kind of mindset of constantly testing in a test environment and then deploying it doesn't work anyway and need to fix it. So just start deploying it into a live environment and then just try and fix things quickly.
And to move on to another topic, 12 marathons and 52 half marathons in 2021. Where do you get your drive, Nick? And how can exercise help personal well-being?
Well, I've always really enjoyed sport, playing and watching sport. And I think after I stopped playing rugby, I wanted to find something to do. And running became that thing that I did. I guess the benefit of running is you're by yourself, so it's completely time flexible. And particularly as I started to travel more with work over the last 15 years, you just need some running kit and a pair of trainers, so you can do it anywhere in the world. And actually I found it's a really good way of exploring new places. So that's been good. In terms of the challenges and stuff, I've always just liked sort of pushing myself, I guess, and trying to do things. I quite enjoy, it's a bit odd, but I kind of enjoy being in pain a bit. I kind of like that. It's kind of nice. It's a nice feeling, knowing that it's going to be finished at some point. So last year was 12 marathons, one a month, and then a half marathon every week. That was quite tough. This year I'm trying to do 4,160 kilometers in the year, more or less on track. Had planned for this weekend, so I'll catch up. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoy it, and I think it's really good. It's really important for my mental well-being to go out there and to go running. It really clears my mind, and I think I said this way back during the first COVID lockdown, but I've convinced bosses, and I think continue to convince bosses, that actually running for me in the workday is part of my working day, because I'll nearly always come back from a run with a much better idea about how to do something than when I set out. So it's not really even downtime. You could argue it's almost like essential work time, because you're clearing your mind and you're coming up with some solutions. So, yeah.
And I know your running challenges are also to raise money for Team Verrico. Would you mind sharing who Team Verrico are and how people watching this interview can help Team Verrico?
Sure. So Team Verrico is a small volunteer cancer charity, that was founded back in 2013. And it came about because Paul Verrico, who's a very good friend of mine and is still a partner at Eversheds Sutherland, his wife died in 2013, leaving Paul and their two small children. She died of triple-negative breast cancer, and at the time there was a very small group of us who were trying to support Paul and Anna Verrico to get treatment and stuff, and obviously out of her death came a desire to kind of build a legacy, and that's where the charity started. So the charity's principal aims are to support families who are facing difficult times through cancer, whether that's second opinions or really practical support with food or cleaning or childcare. And then we also do some seed funding into research for kind of new treatments or diagnostic methods for particularly for breast cancer, but other cancers as well. So yeah, that's what we've been doing over the last, I guess, nearly 10 years now. And we've raised over £1 million thanks to all of the fundraisers, and distributed that far and wide, and many people have got help they needed. So that's been great. And yeah, I mean, I'm lucky to be the chair of Team Verrico, and my job really is just to kind of, I don't know, I just tinker around really and try and keep everything moving. But then we've got some really committed volunteers who do a lot of the work.
Well, as always, Nick, it's been a pleasure speaking to you today. Thank you.